before I begin this review of the map pack FNAF video, I gotta get to rules first and then I get a couple of warnings, but not entirely of the series itself. For rules, for rule number one, for this timeline, I'm not gonna count any fan theories or any theories, that might one day be debunked soon. And route two, I'm not gonna explain, even though this doesn't start explain entirely the theories. It's not just goes to the theories I pointed out in my sub-report series. My other theories and my new theories of mine will help explain a lot about the series. Third rule is of course this goes of my opinion and how I affect and how I explain the timeline. So be careful what you say in the comment section, please. And the final rule is that this will be not as complicated as you might seem, but I will explain things that I think make sense for the Afton family, and I'll explain how they happen. So, the rules out of the way, let's begin. So, where we start in this timeline? How about the birth of William Afton in 1945? So, the birth of William Afton happens, let's say, around February 16th, 1945. So, after that, what happened next? Next, I have to think that a few years after William Afton's birth, after William Afton is born, that the next thing that happens is Midnight Madness, in that this happens like 8 years after William Afton is born. So let's say the Midnight Madness takes place in 1953, and that William Afton's father is at Barclay Jr.'s, and because of his behavior in the place called Barclay Jr.'s, that's why, as the Orange Man, he gets kicked out. And it doesn't help that he's an abusive father to William Afton. One day, when William Afton was going outside to create machines, William Afton's abusive father had told him to come out and see him, but he wouldn't let him, so he tried again, and the more angry he got, the more abusive he got around his son William. So now we get to the point where William Afton is in his teenage years. Let's say that William Afton's father has died here around William Afton's teenage years, and he now has a plan to build his own machines. That's right, let's just call this the setup of William Afton's plan of animatronics. Let's just call this around the time of somewhere in the early to mid 60s. He starts the plan to build machines, and let's say during mid to late 1967 to early 1968, he moves to he becomes married to mysterious Mrs. Afton and has his son, firstborn Michael. So let's just say during the late 60s, that during the early to mid 60s, William Afton starts playing with machines, and that during the late 60s, he gets married to Mrs. Afton and they have a son called Michael Afton. So let's assume that. So, where does this leave head? Well, the restaurant that started all, what's this we just say? Fredbear's Family Diner, which I assume would be open around July 1st, 1972. And around this time that he built, and that during this time we know of two animatronics that used to be mascots for the restaurant of Fredbear's Family Diner, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which have been activated as suits or animatronics. So let's just say around 5 days after the restaurant opens, the person we know as Phone Guy takes the night shift for 5 nights and checks on the animatronics for the same time. So let's just say this happens around July 6th through the 11th of 1972, where Phone Guy takes the night shift at Fredbear's Family Diner. Now, let's just say that William Afton and Henry Emily gets a phone call at another person who Phone Guy assumes was one of the persons that used to complain that the animatronics were moving toward his office. So, already got this guy named, so let's call the security guard George Marcus. So George Marcus works at the security guard in the same year that Fredbear's Family Diner opens, and when Phone Guy used to survive in restaurants. Anyways, for 5 nights, he just can complain that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were not on the stage and still in his office. So let's just say that William Afton gets him a plan and gets him to have another job at Fredbear's Family at the same restaurant, working as a person who gets to wear the Spring Bonnie suit. Now, remember what was heard before, but too much moisture is happening. The spring locks will fail and the person will be dead inside. So as he hosting for another person who is inside of Fredbear springlock suit, they again work together and try to not to worry about anything. But the person who used to work as a night guard inside the Spring Bonnie suit, he gets to worried and he gets to shake and he gets to quiver and his quivering starts to make him sweat on his face. Unfortunately, since he didn't know about the warnings, his shivering sweat, helps by the malfunctionings of the spring locks, and just like that, both men in the spring lock suits are caused by spring lock failure. And fortunately, they had been dead. But don't worry. Let's just assume that this incident, that phone guy, these two incidents of spring lock failures caused them to become entities known as shadows. So let's say that this happened right after the man who worked at the night guard after phone guy, right, his spring lock failure and him becoming the shadow animatronics happens right after. So, with no one else around, they still keep the Fredbear and Spring Bonnie animatronics. But William Acton has a plan. Instead of making sure to hire new people for the jobs, he instead decides to plan to have 2 other restaurants that he cites. So let's say, he planned that instead. So let's just say that the first restaurant he planned was a year later in 1973, and that restaurant was Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with Freddy, Bonnie, Chica on stage, and Foxy in Pirates Cove. So, let's say, being Freddy Fazbear's Pizza happens here, right after the 2 spring lock incidents that we never see we seen mentioned to be probably by the phone guy mentioned messages. So the animatronics are performing on stage, and of course, the next restaurant that William Acton plans. Let's just say that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened by April 6, 1973. And so, with 2 successful restaurants on their hands, it was now time to to add 2 more animatronics to the Fazbear restaurant. Couple more animatronics for another restaurant to open in the series. Chica's Party World, which I assume started opening around the mid 1974 and closed a year after, during the end of 1975. So, next up, Chica's Party World is opened with a couple of new animatronics we haven't seen before yet. That includes Spring Chica and Sprinter. Yeah. But afterwards, they decided to build a couple other animatronics, that being Lolbit and the JJ animatronic, which I assumes later on gets to be rebuilt as Balloon Boy at one point. But I'm not gonna delve into it yet. Chica's Party World open, and with both restaurants successful at their hands, they finally made it. But another unusual thing happens. Some reason, one of the kids that used to be at Chica's party world was mysteriously not there and was unknown what happened. Someone decides to discover the place and tries to figure out before it closes down. But after hearing that they couldn't find her, they couldn't figure out where she was. But, little surprise she was gone, and that led her to being controlled or controlling the J-Jam tribe.